Hey everybody, Rybo at the bench, and today I wanted to do a quick review on the Steel Wheel Modus. This is a flipper budget option from Steel Wheel that I've been carrying for a couple weeks now, so I have some thoughts to share. So let's get into it. Alright, so Steel Wheel, probably best known for the cut jack up until recently, but they've been coming out with kind of budget versions of a lot of their knives, and they've been very well received. So I think one of the reasons for that is this knife, as well as the others, comes in D2 steel. So it's a great steel, especially considering the price of this knife is under $40. I think I paid between $35 and $40. And so a lot of their budget knives are coming in under 40 bucks with D2 steel, with a robust flipper action, and so you can't really complain about that. So Steel Wheel is kind of gaining some traction. From what I've seen, I have people I know with the cut jack and some of their other knives that they really enjoy. So we'll do a quick size comparison. Probably the closest that I would say is the Spyderco Delica in terms of what I have to show comparison. I look at this as an everyday carry knife. This is typically what I have in my pocket, and so the Modus was kind of, I wanted something that was a little bit beefier, because the Delica, while it's an amazing knife, it's a little bit, it's for everyday carry. It's for, box cutting, things like that. I wanted something a little bit beefier, although I love this knife. So that's kind of what the Modus is. Next up, my other flipper. Well, I have a couple other flippers. This is an unassisted Kershaw Skyline. You can see that the Modus is a bit beefier, a good bit beefier in terms of the blade, and I should have done a comparison with the Spyderco, because you can see the blade thickness is much greater on the Modus. And then finally the Ontario Rat 2. So I believe the Modus is right between the Rat 1 and the Rat 2. I don't have a Rat 1 to show, although you can get, I think, both the Rat 1 and the Rat 2 now in D2 steel as well, but this is the AUS 8 version. And one interesting thing to point out is both of these knives were around the same price when I purchased them, and this is D2, this is AUS 8, so something to keep in mind. Alright, so like I said, 35, 40 bucks, kind of got a size comparison there. It's D2 steel, so you'll need to keep some oil on it. That's not a problem with me. I sharpen with oil stones, so my knives are oiled up pretty regularly. Overall aesthetic, I like it a lot. It's got this kind of sheep's foot blade, I guess you would call it. Originally wasn't my favorite aesthetic, but I absolutely love the utility of this. And so I'm starting to really like the look of it as well. The blade's great. I think the nice sweeping grind is very well executed. The text on both sides of the blade is not overdone like a lot of knives, particularly your Rat 2 here. I cannot stand this Randall's Adventure Training. Give me a break. But this is just very nicely done. It's kind of understated, and I like that a lot. This is definitely a, how do we say this? This is a more menacing knife, especially given that it's a flipper. There have been several times where I've been asked for my knife, and I'll pull this out of my pocket and flip it open, and someone makes a comment about automatic or switchblade, which is laughable, yet you can kind of see how people take something like this. So it's a bigger knife, it's a much beefier blade, and so when someone sees something like this, they're going to be a little bit more intimidated than, say, maybe your Kershaw Skyline, which when you flip this guy open, it's more like, I don't know, it's more like a letter opener or something. This is far less intimidating, and even this is, just given that it's a two-handed open, than this is. This is going to scare some people, which doesn't really bother me. I know who to use it around and who not to, so just something to kind of keep in mind. All right, what else? Highlights of the knife. So controversial, I guess, but the scales here, I really like the design. It's very different from what you normally see. Obviously with Spyderco, you're kind of used to this almost radial pattern that they have on the FRN. You're used to something like the G10. See if I can get that texture in there. There we go. So something like the G10, which is pretty standard on a lot of knives. And then one of my most hated on the Rat 2, which looks very grippy in pictures, but when you actually handle one of these, it's like, well, I don't want to get into it, but it's not. It's very slick. So this is very different. It's new. I don't really know what you'd call it. It's like this fragmented kind of design, but what it produces is something that's very grippy. It's different to look at, and I like it. I like it a lot. These knives come in maybe 3 color combinations, and one of the things they do is they contrast the scales with this backspacer. This has not quite, let me close the knife so I don't cut myself, not quite a full backspacer, but pretty close, maybe 3/4 of the way. And it's pretty cool. So I really like the green. You can tell I'm kind of, I like these kind of flat, dark earth green colors. The Spyderco was way out of character for me. But I really like the look of this. They contrast it with the black, which is just really nice and understated. I think they also have maybe a blue and orange and a black and blue, maybe. I can't remember. This one I just really like the look of. And so you've got this full backspacer that's metal, and it's got the lanyard hole right there as well. Clip, you can only carry this tip up, but you can carry it left or right. And let's see what else. We have a pocket clip here. I'll talk a little bit about that in my frustrations. And that's about it. So overall, nice knife. It is, I would say probably still an everyday carry, maybe a little bit of a step up from that. For me, this is going to be my yard work knife. So until now, this has kind of been the knife that's been out in the workshop with me, or when I'm cutting grass or doing yard work outside or spreading mulch or whatever. I think I talked in one of my previous videos about that's why I made the decision to get something brighter, because one time I almost ran over my Rat 2 with my lawnmower because it blended right into into the yard. Probably not the greatest choice then to get this kind of green color, but we'll go with it. This is a great kind of knife for bigger tasks like that. And so this is probably something that's going to stay out in the shop with me because I think it's just a great knife for that. Little bit heavy in the pocket, although it's definitely doable. Like I said, I've been carrying it for a couple weeks now. No major complaints in terms of size. All right, ergonomics, very, very nice in the hand. I think no real hot spots. Sometimes this pocket clip for a lot of knives will be a hot spot in the hand. For me, at least, it conforms right in the hand, and you don't even really notice it. So no issues there for me. Let's see, the pocket clip, like I said, and let's go ahead and get into frustrations. So first frustration is the pocket clip. So the pocket clip is kind of what it is. I really like something like the Delica, something that is just easy to hook into, although I've noticed with the Delica it can get loose fairly quickly. With the Modus, the pocket clip itself is fine. I have no issues with this design. I think it's sleek enough, it's easy enough to get into the pocket in terms of the ramp here and here. I have no issues with that. What I do have an issue with is this scale here is so grippy that it tears up your pocket, and it's hard to get in and out. So if you imagine, let me look for something too. Here's a piece of foam. So if you imagine that you're going to clip this into your pocket, you can see that where the ramp here meets the scale is very, very textured. And so what that means is you're going to end up tearing up your pocket, or you're just going to struggle to get the clip over your pocket. I've noticed that quite a bit, whereas something like on your Spyderco, you have the logo here. And so while you do have a grippy texture here, where the ramp meets, you have this logo here, and it makes it very, very smooth to get in and out of the pocket. Something like your Kershaw, you don't really have a grippy enough G10 to get to have any problems there. And like I said before, with the Rat 2, it's not grippy enough anyway, so you're never going to have issues. When you have something that's this grippy, and I don't know if you can tell this, but there's actually 2 layers when these are milled. I don't know if you can see that. Yeah, it looks like you can. So they're fairly deep. If you can tell, that's a fairly deep cutouts there. And so when you're going to have something that grippy, you really need a smooth space behind that pocket clip. Otherwise, it's kind of a pain, and that's what I've noticed. So that's complaint number one. Complaint number two, this is really the biggest one, and this is probably my number one complaint, and the one reason this knife is probably not going to be an everyday carry knife for me. The flipper. So first impressions, and this isn't the big issue, but first impressions, at least on mine, the flipper is hard to operate. So I actually gave this to a friend the other day to cut something, and they couldn't get this open because they sat here and pressed and pressed and pressed, and they were like, "Are you sure it's not locked? Are you sure it's not locked?" So I was like, "No, it's not locked, just keep pressing." They sat here and pressed and finally flipped open. And I've noticed it's loosened up just a little bit, and it falls shut. I really don't have any issues. I don't know if I can get that on camera. I don't have any issues with the action once it's open. In fact, applying minimal pressure to open it always has opened the flipper completely. However, it can be very, very difficult to push down here, and just a little bit more of a detent than I would really expect. The bigger issue, however, is this is insanely uncomfortable in the pocket. So if you imagine I carry like this, so this is basically rubbing against, anytime I go into my pocket, this just scrapes my hand every time. I carry my knife on the right pocket, and I carry a front pocket wallet, and so I'm always going into my pocket to get a knife. And what happens is this is very sharp. It is not rounded, and it's just very, very noticeable. It's even noticeable when you're not going in the pocket. It I think sticks out way farther than it needs to, and the curve here doesn't compensate enough. If you look at something like your Skyline, which is obviously a smaller knife, it looks like it would have a similar issue, but they have rounded this flipper so much that I've never had an issue. So when I do touch this, it's not a problem. Whereas on the Modus, this is just very sharp, and I don't know if that's really going to come across in the video, but it's very, very sharp and really frustrating. And so because of that, because it's a little bit of a wider knife, I guess I should show the width of these. Obviously the Spyderco is always going to look fairly wide because of this, but it's so light that it doesn't really matter. But because it's such a wide knife, especially considering the width from the flipper here, you know, it's way, way, way more noticeable in the pocket than it really has to be. With your Spyderco, the clip being where it is, you're carrying a lot of that up on the inside of your pocket where you're not going to feel it. With this, you're still carrying a lot of the knife on the inside of the pocket, but your hand just constantly hits this right here, and it's really, really annoying. So those are my two main complaints, both having to do with the flipper. You know, I think it's a phenomenal knife other than that, especially for the money. It's not going to go anywhere, but it's probably not going to get as much pocket time just on a day-to-day basis as something like the Rat 2, the Delica might get. However, if anything, it's taught me I'm definitely going to be checking out more of Steel Will's offerings in the future. I think it's a phenomenal budget option. It's very different from the other knives that you might see at the same price point, and so I applaud them for doing something a little bit different. I think the scale is really cool. I really like almost the full backspacer here and just kind of how they've done that. I think they have a really beautiful blade design. The grind is really well executed. It's just a perfect amount of jimping. I don't think I talked about that, but it is really a perfect amount of jimping up here. It's not too aggressive, unlike the flipper here, and it's not too much, but it gives you a perfect amount to lock in. I think the size of the knife is really, really nice. You know, it's not too big, it's not too small, and so it's definitely going to be staying in my collection. So bottom line, cut or carry, you know, I would say this is probably the hardest one I've had to do yet, just because I'm not going to carry it daily, but I'm definitely not going to cut it from my rotation. I think it's a specialized knife, for me at least, that's going to have a dedicated use. It's going to be in the pocket on chore days, or, you know, days when I'm outside or camping, or hiking or doing something active or in the workshop, because I think it's it's a beast. It's a thick slab of steel that can get the job done as long as you keep it oiled regularly, and it's definitely not going to go anywhere. However, for daily carry, it's just a little bit big for me. It's a little bit heavy, and most importantly, that flipper just drives me absolutely insane. But otherwise, very nice knife. I'm a big fan. So that's it. Hopefully this has been helpful to you, and we'll see you next time. Thanks.